It's always tough to live through those introductions, but those were kind words, and thank you very much. Is everybody can hear me okay with this? Yes? Thumbs up there? All right. Appreciate that very much. So we get thumbs up. I had the pleasure of getting a certificate from Marshall Road State School today from about 500 kids that I spoke to this morning. So they are a tough audience, I promise you. They are a tough audience. And at one level, I mean, I saw this when I was pulling out my computer, I thought, the reason they're a tough audience is because the things we talk about, I say, oh, it's going to be the kids, the future, right? And you're looking at them. And you can't tell them lies. And you got to say, hey, what are we going to do for you guys and girls? And so it puts a lot of responsibility on you. You guys, it's over with for you all, right? But those kids, it's important. So that sometimes drives me in my own motivation in the things I do. And let's see, I'm going to learn to use the machine here to make sure I'm going the right way. Yes, that's right. So I hope you like the weather I brought with me. It's been great. And I really enjoy coming down here. Boy, what a garden spot, literally. And it's been a great pleasure. Again, I want to, Dr. McKinnon's thanks to Spatial Industries Business Association. Those people helped work with QUT to bring me here and to share some of my thoughts and feelings and experiences I've had. And what's important, I think, is that you're seeing a team between industry and academia, and that's an important partnership. Now, Kofi Annan, he was my boss when I was in the United Nations, and I had the job as the Chief Environmental Scientist for the United Nations Environment Program, which was a pretty heady job. For me, very big responsibility, and you'll see that woven in some of these issues. So I'm a happy guy, but that was a sobering experience. And Kofi Annan said, for us to get ourselves into the right section of the world in the future, we're going to have to develop Type 2 partnerships. Does anybody know what Type 2 partnerships are? Oh boy. So not only are you going to hear some talks today, you're going to learn things, which is always a good thing on a campus. Type 2 partnerships is business, academia, government, and citizens. The four horsemen, okay? And I agree. And you say, well, where does that exist? And you're going to find it doesn't exist very many places. So we did a survey around the world and tried to find that for the 2002 World Summit on Sustainability. And we went, this is interesting. The ingredients for success and sustainability we think we understand, and when we look around for who's cooking it up, wasn't happening. That's the other reason I'm very excited to be here, and invitation of Dean Betts and others on the campus, Bob Owen and others, and SIBA, was that they got it, and they said, that's what we want to put together. And I just came off of the Premier Newman's assistant meeting with Zoe Wilson. Guess what? She likes that idea too, and she thinks that that's where we should be going. And she says that that's where your premier wants to go as well. So we've got a lot of people aligned to do some of the things. The reason I'm setting you up with some positive thoughts is because I'm going to share some other information with you in a minute. First, I've been around a little while and was blessed to be at the front end of the geospatial world, and got into that when I was in graduate school, found out about spatial information and was using computers. And of course, like a lot of people, got out of college and said, hey, I want a job. Well, guess what? There was no such thing. So I started my own company. And so I suffered. If anybody's ever done their own company, they know. So I suffered and struggled while Steve Jobs and those other guys were making millions. I pulled through, but I got recognized by some major organizations, including the U.S. Department of Defense and many others, and ended up leading a lot of the work that I've done starting in the late 70s. So I wrote a book on the history of GIS for anybody who wants to see how it really came about. I've worked on things like, if we got this planet Earth and we got some challenges, how are we going to solve it? So I got involved with, if you will, an operating system for our planet and the potential for us to get there. And I work on those concepts, and I'll share some of that with you. And then I recently published a thing on visualizing physical geography, which is good. How do we see things? Because if you see it, you might believe it. Now, this is one of my favorite planets. I don't know about you, but I call it home, and it's got some serious conditions. And so I'll talk about some of those, but viewer discretion advised. Any of those that don't want to hear some of the things about the planet, you might lose sleep tonight. I'm going to share some of them, but that's just to set the stage, okay? I'm not here to try to do doom and gloom and depress you. In fact, we're meeting at a pub later. For those, I'll give a pint to anybody that says they need it just to recover, okay? So we'll go that route. So, some of the questions that we like to ponder, all right? How are things working? What do we give those children that I had to face this morning? And how can we protect and preserve the things that we think are near and dear to our hearts? So there's a lot of questions we need to pose and think about in our lifestyle, in our research. Are we addressing any of those? As we go through those, what are the problems? How do we know the problems? And a lot of times, that's a good question. Something will be put forth, climate change, global warming, things like that, and people say, is it happening? How do we know? You do need to know how we know, and I'll show you how we know a little bit. Okay, so who should be involved? Just a few people in the university? Oh, that's right, we can solve all the problems of the planet, right? Back to coffee and on. All of us need to work together. Why should we? Well, that should be obvious. The where shows up time and time again, and that's that spatial glue that we want to keep reminding ourselves. Why the space is so important. And how to get engaged? Well, we'll take a sign up after the course or the lecture. So some of the threatened animals on this planet, and I found out quite a few of the children, I did a survey, quite a few had seen a drop bear. There was a small minority that didn't actually believe they existed, but the majority did. So I'm very impressed because I only learned about drop bears recently. But I think it's worth preserving all these things. Now, different people have a view of where we're at, right? If you have this view, then you are boreal-centric in your behavior. If you have this view, then you have the right view. And you got to think about it. Same image, but how do you see the world? And there's no reason this isn't the right view. Is that true? Right? And yet that's the way it is. So I would posit that the way our brains work has to do with how we view things. And for those of you who want to get an extra credit, epistemology, there's a good word for you. You can use that in your next class. All right. Yes, we are exhaling CO2. So are we polluting the environment? No, we're not polluting the environment by breathing out. But the way we run our energy system, fossil fuels, etc., we have a challenge because we do know. And the reason we know is this guy who should have gotten a Nobel Prize. Is everybody familiar with the Keeling Curve? That's a hard way to say it. Who hasn't ever seen the Keeling Curve? That's a tough one too. There you go. The Keeling Curve, and there's a lot of people that haven't. Thank you for your honesty, sir. In the late 50s, Charles David Keeling ran to the top of the highest mountain in Hawaii to measure CO2 in the air. Up till that time, we did not know it was increasing. So once he started collecting the carbon dioxide measurements, all of a sudden, you know, the first few years, how do you know what's going on? That's right, I got a pointer. The first few years, how do we know what's going on? And what it is winter, summer, and that means different things to different people. We're in springtime here. But as the northern hemisphere has all its greenery, it sucks in the carbon dioxide and it goes to the minimum. When it drops all the leaves, it does the opposite, so there's more carbon dioxide because the mass of the planet is on the northern hemisphere in terms of greenery. So it goes up and up and up. Well, that's how we found out we actually are increasing. So it's not somebody's opinion. It wasn't a political party that made this curve. This was bona fide science, and that's why we care. Because if your kid had a temperature like that, you wouldn't say, gee, I wonder where it's going. You would say, oh, let us think about this. The greenhouse concept of CO2 going in the atmosphere and getting a blanket that thermally enhances the planet was not invented last year, the year before, the year before. It was done by a bloody Swede 100 years ago, okay? So we've known about this for a long time. So we understand the physics and the chemistry. And now it's upon us as to what's going on. And now we're going out, running out with international science. And in the UN, I worked with scientists from everywhere and government officials to bring these data together so that we could find out what's going on. and the water's warming up, and the atmosphere is warming up. It's not debatable. We can go back with a variety of measurements, a lot of different ways of doing it, and we find out that we're at the highest temperature in a long time. How high? Whoops, sorry guys up there. How high? Well, very high. Let's go back a little farther. 650,000 years, I think most statutes of limitations would apply to that, right? We're not responsible for that. We're still higher. So it's just awesome to where we are, and for people to say, and I have had many people say, well, it's part of nature's cycle, and we should just watch and see what goes on. And I go, yeah, but nature's real brutal when it comes to extinction, and I don't want to just sit by and watch this adventure. I'd like to be paying attention while it happens, at least. I want to be awake, because there are some impacts, and we know they're out there. And there's a litany. You can make a career being a climate scientist these days. Well, that's one end of the spectrum, or you can make a career out of being a good citizen and scientist and dealing with a lot of issues. In the meantime, maybe take a walk to work, take a subway to work sometimes. What do we learn from people that live on islands in the South Pacific? I don't know, that's you guys and gals. Well, what we learn is that people that live in grass houses and store stones have something to offer us. It's hard to say that fast. And Jared Diamond and others have found out that when you don't behave properly in the ecological goods and services, the environment that you have, if you don't do things properly, a transition will occur. And that transition may be catastrophic to you or not, but things happen. So we need to learn from history. We need to learn from what we can do, and we need to better behave. One of my jobs, and this was the sobering part, I'll get to the happy part soon, the sobering part, was I had to deliver the report card of the planet to 192 nations. Well, it was harsh. And it was harsh for me. I actually did go through a little downside there for a while thinking, wow, this is not fun. I thought this was going to be a great job, but I'm preparing a report card, and it's like, uh-oh. But like a friend of mine reminded me, this recent report card, we had 4 out of 90 things that showed some progress, and we ended up with a 2.25. I don't know how you guys grades on curves here, but that's still a little low. You can shift the curve. But as one friend said, hey, it's better than 0. So yeah, okay. We've gone up and measured 8 nations. Their best scientists have come together. So again, I love it when people tell me this is a political thing and da-da-da. I go, well, the best scientists from the northern countries have come back, and they've been measuring the loss of ice. And that's why we say, yep, things are happening. And when they come back, they go, it's amazing because not only we're losing it, but we're losing it faster. So it's accelerating. So some interesting things are happening. We don't have to be doom and gloom, but if you do have a house on the water, you might consider a few options because things are happening, right? And as Ed Wilson reminds us, we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction of species, and that's a serious thing. So we can do things about that. Again, don't get too depressed yet. We got happy thoughts ahead, but we've got to set the pace, the stage of why this is serious, right? And I'm showing you enough issues here of why it's serious, and it shouldn't be a game. It shouldn't be a video game. It shouldn't be anything. This is the world we live in, and we need to face it. Shoot, the world I lived in was Khrushchev was going to nuke us, you know? So we all come, and we come to awareness and maturity at different levels. This is everywhere in the news, and one of the things that bothers me, and by the way, a lot of good letters. There was somebody from nearby, 2007. Some of you may know him, Tim Flannery. So you've got your own folks writing things about this. One of the things that bothers me is children, their number one fear in polls taken in the UK and the United States, number one fear, climate change. What are we selling them? That is a horrible thing to hand a generation. If the climate is changing, okay. Let's deal with it. Not doom and gloom and fear. We need to, have them worry about drop bears, not climate change. You understand the perspective that we're handing these? So it's everybody's job here. Now, you've got a lot of different perspectives on how this message is coming about, right? And you can see how some people are going, I don't know. the bottom line, throw climate change out of your dialogue. The bottom line is sustainability of the planet, equitability of all nations. That's the bottom line. So the things we should do for sustainability, oh, by the way, it's going to help in climate change. So you don't have to talk about climate change at all, because to many people, and I have some friends in the United States that are very right-wing, if I say climate change, their head just, oop, no, not going to think, not going to think. But if I say sustainability and keeping the car markets open in Australia and doing this or that, then they'll engage, because they can talk about it. So you got to think about how we look at that. So I think that's all the horrible slides. Oh, no, there's one. The Kiwis. Anybody know some Kiwis here? Any All Blacks fans? You realize they got a love affair with cars? They're number 2. It's horrible. I see one Kiwi squirming. He knows. This is the kind of thing we need to do. So go buy a car from a Kiwi and get them to quit. So these are the kinds of things we have to deal with, because in the picture, at night, when we tuck each other in bed, we got to go, what's the vision we want here? What's really a good way for us to live on this planet? And I don't like this one myself. I think we need to change. And yet, 3 pillars of sustainability: economy, social, environment. It's a shaky, scary world out there, right? It's going to lead some of us into a lot of directions. As I say, maybe there's a theology degree we ought to add to this department, because people are going to be wondering what's going on. But not a panacea, but a tremendous set of arrows in our quiver are the technological ones. I could sell you on technology, except you're sitting here in the QUT. So this is the epitome of a place that thinks about technology. And so we want to do that because it's exciting. But to put it in perspective, this is an advanced statistic that I developed years ago. When you're sitting there and you're talking about those things I was telling you, and you notice that everybody's moving down the line, and you're like, okay, you probably aren't communicating the way you want to, right? You've got to advance that. So if you start talking about some of these issues and they move over and the guy says, would you like an ale? Where are you from? Then you know you're engaged. And this group, you all think and talk alike, more so than a lot of the people out there in the bars. And so at home, your neighbors, have that conversation. Have that conversation and hear from them what they say. And if they say, well, climate change claptrap, I read about it someplace else, then you say, well, okay, let's put climate change away. Let's talk about the rest of the planet. So there's so many ways to engage. And that's what I want you to get to think about. How do we engage with the rest of the planet? Sometimes I think you don't appreciate, you, academic, government, us, what people prefer. Left side or right side? Left side or right side? What is going to make people, the rest of us Homo sapiens, this is what they like. And if somebody's telling you differently in the university, I'll talk to you later about it, okay? This is what they like. So how we view ourselves as scholars, as intellectuals, as, graduates of the university, where are we at? I was a lot of bit of that first guy. I was like explorer, entrepreneur, that's where I was, young. I wasn't so attracted to the lone wolves. There's places full of them. I'll bet you've seen one or two. But it's working with some of the others down here and saying, no, let's make this happen. That's again why I'm very attracted to this QUT, SIBA, Government of Queensland relationship, because they're down here. They're down here making it happen. Because things are happening fast, are they not? And as I say, if you were waiting for the gun to go off at the starting line, you missed the sound. It got up. Now, we had a statistician. Did she come today? I don't know if she showed up. But you all know statistics, and our friend Mr. Bell, most of the people out there are not engaged. And if you do it on math sometimes, I used to have my students do it, they thought, so you think you're 1%. Oh, no, I'm not top 1%. Yes, you are. You are in the top 1% of the world, unquestionably, unquestionably. And so the ones that are going to think about what it's going to take to move that over a little bit and get more engaged, that's the challenge we have. And I don't know if you know Bill Rees and Mathis Walkernagher. They're the ones that came up with the ecological footprint and began looking at how much of this earth we're using to support our lifestyle. And we thought, it'd be nice to know. Well, unfortunately, it came like 2.5 planets is required to keep us living in the quality of life that we want. So we have to act fast. Uh-oh, is there a chance? Is it not going to work? How many people are out there? Well, that's not where the people all live. That's where the people use energy, because Africa's got a lot of people, about 900 million out there, but they're not using the electricity. So it's not just population. So I pause as I think about one of the challenges for us to get our heads around this, and it dawned on me some time ago that we're dealing with exponential. And we talk about exponential because, hey, exponential this, exponential that. And I started really trying to find out the fundamentals of exponentials and how do we think about it. And what I came up, because, we're at 7.2 billion. The reason it was important to me is some of the baby boomers in here, there was 2.5 billion when we were born. So we were down there, here we are, and yet how do we think about population growth? And most of us don't get blown over every time we see 7.2, but it's exponential. I posit that it's our brains are not wired for exponential. We do not have the innate programming to understand exponential. Through primitive tribes everywhere, you get by with 1, 2, 3, many. It's in the Chinese language of the number system and many, many others. And so if you go through, that's all you needed. So you say, how many snakes in the bush? 1. That's good enough. How many stars in the sky? Many. That's good enough. You realize you could do most everything you needed with 1, 2, 3, many. And it worked for hundreds of thousands of years. But now we're up there trying to scale this thing, whether we want to or not, and we don't have that programmed in our head. So we deal with things like Moore's law, and how is all this rapid technology increasing, even though that's a cost-based law. And where's that going to go? Are we going to get singularity, artificial intelligence? Well, how do we put our brains around that exponential increase? It's very difficult. We teach ourselves as scientists and engineers to do logs and to see lines like that, because otherwise, and we're not talking one exponential curve. We're talking population growth, resources declining, species, etc., etc., etc. So I say that this is a whole other area, and this is the kinds of things that we would talk about at QUT in the future, is to get people interested in some basic theology and theory of how the brain works. How do we comprehend this? Because we've been assuming when we tell people exponential growth of population that they get it. Why would they get it? Just doesn't happen. So, things out there, you can show them pictures, and that helps, but people aren't going to get it because we don't get it innately. And so when they rise up to do good things, we need to understand that. Our job, study, communicate, go back. It's an iterative process that we've been trained to do, is it not? And where we have to do it to make an impact is right here in Oz, right here locally. That's where you can absolutely have a big impact. And we've got to re-establish our basic premise for why we're doing it. I'm not going to preach those things. People come up with their own ideas of what we need to do to be sustainable. And then we can talk about technology again, the QUT salvation. Space and change are happening fast. What we have is the world affairs. I've showed you enough of that. Don't need to talk about it. But the speed, again, is what I want to show you one little idea. After we get a foundation of the space. Immanuel Kant. Those Germans gave us a lot of good things, the Volkswagen. They also gave us a philosophy that said all of knowledge is based in these 3 spheres. All of knowledge. So that our whole epistemology, our whole concept of what we know is based in these 3 areas. And you can translate that to all the data you collect and everything else. Space, time, and categories and numeration. When we put those together, we end up with everything being, as I say, the big picture of where everything comes, but also big data. So now we can translate to big data is actually composed of space, time, and things, numbers. In a spatial context, we go back to Buckminster Fuller, and I highly recommend you reading some of Bucky Fuller's work because he predicted mid-century, last century, the creation of a 3D geoscope where we could learn about the planet and use computers to make important decisions on how to survive on the planet. And Bucky even wrote a book called Spaceship Earth, which I highly recommend because it talks about this planet we're living on, going through the cosmos, has everything we need to live on, and if we don't do it right, we're going to be in trouble. So it's a great metaphor. And he brought in the three-dimensional and the computer issues. So again, the things I'm talking about are on the shoulders of giants, like Buckminster Fuller. Waldo Tobler, first rule of geography, things closer together are more related than things far apart. You lasses and blokes are more related than I am back in the US. And that's a truism. So space also has an important component in commerce, who you're going to sell to, transportation, how far you're going to go, etc. So this is just one. We'll teach you a little geography today. Waldo Tobler, delightful fellow, still around. But it gets us asking important spatial questions. And the important spatial questions began being answered in the early 80s with the explosion of geographic information systems. We could look at a map and overlay it and ask these questions. So these fundamental questions, and there's more, but this is basically it. What are related? Where are my neighbors? Where are neighbors? Do I have neighbors that store nuclear waste? You know, what are the kinds of things going on? Where's pollution? What do I need to worry about? Spatial as an ingredient of decision support is critical. And the Queensland government is dealing with so much of it and what they have to go through. Again, who lives where what are the impacts, how we all relate, and how can we get more taxes? So, a lot of information out there, and we see it out there, and it has spatial attributes for most of it. We were just talking to Zoe Wilson, and when they looked through it, they had 600 databases, and they classified 400 of them as spatial, even though others have relationships. So that's what they found, just for all the volumes of data they were looking at. And the question is, can you find something that isn't spatial? It's not easy. So the idea of this growing world with information, with spatial attributes, and look what the kinds of things you can do. Company, a little German expert, what is it called? Wisdom, that's right, that did a little experiment. There's things people are doing right now on the relationships that are mind-boggling. And when you begin to jump into the bigger big data, social media, there is so much you can learn about people because people are very, very generous with providing you private information about their lives. Yeah, a lot more than I ever thought possible. They're doing it. So this is this incredible world we've got with technology and change and this and that. But what about the time aspect? Keeping an eye on the time. And again, how do we perceive that? I'll give you one example which explains why I know I cannot. So I'm not claiming that I can think through this time thing. I had the great pleasure of being befriended and befriending Ed Mitchell. He was the 6th man to walk on the moon. So I got to hang with some astronauts. They're cool. They're all old fighter pilots, so they're good guys. At his birthday, a couple years ago, down in Florida, we're all sitting there as a dozen of us, and somebody gives him a birthday card. You've been there, right? It opens up. Da-da-da-da-da-da. That's trademark, so I can't sing it. Da-da-da-da-da-da. So they have the little card, and it sings. And I went, oh, stop, stop. Ed. And he goes, what? I said, hold that up, please. God, what's Tim got me doing now? He holds it up, and I said, Ed, what are you going to do after the party? Are you going to throw it in the trash can? He goes, yeah. I said, okay, you should recycle, Ed. You know that's right. He goes, yeah. I said, now tell us, more or less computing power in Apollo 14 than the card you just said you're going to throw away? And he goes, oh, this card's got a lot more computing power than Apollo 14. Not just a little, a lot more. and it was going in the trash can. Okay, how do you put your head around that? I mean, I'm talking to the guy that landed there, and I can't put my head around that. So if that happened, and I say, where are we going to be 30 years from now? Tell me that we even have a chance of comprehending that. If you had told Ed when he landed on the moon, by the way, you're going to get a birthday card 30 years from now, going to time capsule, there's no way. So it's very challenging, all these concepts that we talk about. Of course, Moore's Law and these other things, I'll let you follow up on those in detail, but in Moore's Law alone, at the beginning of this curve, Nobel, Alfred, actually sent the first rocket up and took the first picture. So anybody who's into remote sensing, here's a little historical factoid, took the first picture from a rocket over 100 years ago. And now we've got, what, 1 or 2 satellites up there? Yeah, at least. And this is just a small picture of them. There are so many up there, they need a traffic cop. It really is busy. But those are providing us information about the planet, crustal movement, all kinds of good stuff. So that's what we're being enabled with, empowered with, in terms of spatial information and technology. I had the pleasure of serving for the county manager as the GIS manager for Clark County, Nevada, with its famous city, Las Vegas. Fastest growing city in the United States. Watching the people move in, mind-boggling. So change in technology and using spatial information to understand this is what we sent in the United Nations. When I moved to the United Nations, we did this all over the world to show people how things are changing the landscape. I'll bet if you took a few pictures here 25 years ago, you'd see a few differences too, wouldn't you? So getting a better handle on that requires spatial information and technology and an understanding of how to apply it. Very valuable for planning the future to figure out where we came from. Wonderful little place, gives us butterflies. It's a plethora of pharmaceuticals available from the Amazon. But then somebody let in a road, and the foresters started going to town, and the next thing you know, we're deforesting the last tropical forest is untouched down in Amazon. Very important stuff to get a handle on, measure, and to communicate. Otherwise, who's going to care? Because I don't know about you, but I haven't been down there. So the Digital Earth program, initiative, community started from NASA based on these issues, and we began to look at what are the tools out there that we can deal with. So anybody recognize that? Who can tell me what that image is of? Come on. What is it? Thought somebody would sucker in with Google Earth, and they're wrong. This is the company Google Earth bought. Keyhole. This is the first image. Because I hired them and gave them their first contract, and we had them show this in Nairobi to begin looking at the planet at the UN so people could get it. Because I was tired of handing that report card to 192 nations and going, oh, things aren't going so good. I want them to take charge. I want to be responsible, be aware. And I like that. I like that. So that's what we did. And then, boom, it's happening right here. We just yesterday saw a big event. You've got Mr. Newman is up there doing this. You got it. You got Queensland Globe. So there's not going to be any excuse for you to misbehave here, is there? No, no, no. So we need a strategy that talks about how we do that, though. It's very complex, and that's your job. That's your job. And this was a model that we came up with in the UN that says we have silos of information. We've got departments in universities, right? We've got people in different disciplines. You're not going to change that. Don't try. It's like hitting your head against a brick wall. Get a chemist to think like a biologist or a physicist to think like a sociologist. It ain't going to happen. But if you take those silos of information and integrate them with our tools, based off what? Foundations, the kinds of things that SIBA and other organizations fight for in terms of open standards. Built on that foundation, we can tie that information together and start looking at the social, economic, and environmental components in a planet and say, aha, this is where I want to be. We want to plan the future, and we want to do a darn good job. Guess what? That hasn't happened yet. This is the image. This is the model that I hope is a vision. You go, we could do that, because they just did open data in Queensland. I just talked to the lady that kicked it off, which means you have access to all that. Is it going to be easy? No. Do you have all the interfaces? No. Do you have all the models and tools for using it? No. So business and the university have a whole tremendous opportunity to be successful in this, whether it's a PhD or a wonderful application for a business. So much opportunity here. Very exciting time. So from these, it can go to many different systems. Many different systems. Google Earth's just one. Just one. So tremendous and obvious benefits, right? All this stuff. This is good news. Look at all. You got to love that. That's like God, Mom, and apple pie. Absolutely. This is what we want. So there we go. In the hands of the people, we have the technology. And this is the good news. They're connected. They know where they're going. Absolutely. Sometimes they get distracted, but hey, they're just human beings, right? They have important messages to share. They have a voice. Of course, you've read the newspapers recently. It's going to cost you 30 days of probation if you actually kill somebody. And it's happening. Now, a Malthusian, those that are of the Malthusian bent might say this is a good way to go. But I'm kind of thinking, we still have another challenge. We have a challenge, and we have a challenge to figure this out before Darwinian principles figure it out for us. We need to think about what's going on with this anonymous crowd out there, this big, powerful, and look up Sir Galton. Did some interesting things with the wisdom of crowds. I won't go into great detail on it. But what's bothered me is I've been looking around and I'm going, okay, the human condition. Remember, you got to talk to your neighbor, your family. We're getting together and we say, that's a romantic evening? Not the ones I remember. Let's see here. We like sports. We like arts. Not working for me. The great outback. Let's go on outside and see the good world, eh? I'm going, what's going on? And it's a gender transition issue, right? So it's covering everybody. But I'm kind of wondering about that. But that's feeding big data. And big data is a great buzzword. Whatever your paper, whatever your research, just put big data on front. You're going to get funded. Don't worry about it. So things that took 100 years to get the baseline in are now digitally available for you right there. So the time factor, again, is mind-boggling for some of us that were in that primary. And here's something I popped off of the Queensland Globe. And, so these are the things you've got at your fingertips. So there's no excuse of not having of data and the coverage. And we're going to need that because there's a lot of things in the I don't know if we have any biologists, ecologists in here, but nth dimensional hypervolumes describes an ecological niche. And we've never been able to model it, but we've been able to describe it. Now the computers and 3D modeling and the things we've got are going to be able to approach it. This is the highest dimension driven ever shown in physics. Again, it's kind of fuzzy. But why do we want n-dimensional hypervolumes? Why? How can this technology help us? This is disease, if I remember right. It was a kind of fish. So these were fish diseases spreading throughout the United States. It was published, you can get that paper, it's actually Australian authors. Without the models and the three-dimensional tools, we can't do things that are very practical. So if you like to eat fish, you're going to want to know about things. So it all starts to come together from the confluence of topics and issues in science coming back to the spatial is phenomenal. And the big data aspect is kind of like that big hole we're all stepping into. And we're going to get lost unless we pay attention. So this is phenomenal. A lot of sociologists. I mean, the connection issues, we're just touching it. We're just touching it. I keep coming up with, I like people being able to report something without having their name known, but I really don't want people without their name causing trouble in society. So how do we balance that? How do we balance that? I think in my country that you got freedom of speech. Yes, if you stand up and represent yourself, not if you don't tell people who you are. So I think we all respect that. If you got something to say, stand up and say it. We'll support you. But it's anonymous. So that's a real tricky area we need to look at. But it's amazing, and I think some of you have used some of these tools. Who's connected to what? What's connected to what? it gets real exciting, and you can learn a lot of things. The analytics on this are phenomenal when we look at disease or marketing or social issues or biology, you name it. And so when we begin to put our fingers on these connections, and you'll notice in this diagram that Buddha is being poked at, right? But who's the guy in action? The one in Australia. So you see, this is Australia making a difference. And so as we begin to think and study more about our minds and how they work, and the artificial intelligence and brain engineering and mapping, we see tremendous advances. And that's why I got off cocaine. It's one picture and I knew that was never going to do it. No, that's how we're discovering things. And the poor little children, their brains weren't really formulated at 16. It took way into the 20s. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't throw them all in prison. Maybe we should work for them a little longer. Yeah, so the things we're learning from the brain imagery and the brain mapping are helping us. And we've got so many areas in the spatial and this exponential area. We talked about digital Earth a little bit. Physiome, the body, amazing concepts. Genome, the DNA. We are really, really in an interesting time. It's kind of like an intersection with everybody having a road rally coming through the intersection, and you're standing there coming from all directions. It's very, very dizzying at times. And yet we have, and this is thanks to SIBA, one of the developments is having the iPads, the things that people are carrying around. When they go to a house, amazing engineering applications. What about if the house is on fire? Wouldn't it be nice to know that there were some children in the back room? Things of that nature. So what if you come to another house and you want to find out how much energy loss is in it? So tremendous applications being able to take our spatial knowledge and information and be able to walk in the real world and apply it. So this is a very, very exciting visualization, three-dimensional space-time, fourth dimension, at a time when what's happening? Everywhere you're getting your picture taken, whether you want to or not. We're a spatially enabled, a web society. So everything, the information, again, over 90% of the information that exists today occurred in the last 2 years. So 2 years from now, 90% of the information that's ever existed on the planet, ever, it will have just been created because of all of these things. So I remember when I started off in grad school, we always started off your thesis like, where are you going to get your data? And that was always a challenge. And sometimes you'd spend 3 years getting your data, and then you'd do your analysis, and it was 90% of your thing was getting data. Anybody that spends 3 years getting data today, I want to talk to them. I think I can save you a little time. Data is there. And so as we sit within this concept of space and time and what's going on with speed in our brains, we do want to reflect, and that's why I started off the talk. We want to reflect with why we're doing it, what's important, what's our mandate, our manifest destiny, what binds all of us together in an agreement in space and time as to why we want to play with these games. And I think we use these tools to begin mapping and charting a world that's going to be meaningful to our children, meaningful to us. One where equity, green concepts, yes, a lot of these are touchy-feely concepts, but since we all benefit, why not let the touchy-feely lead the way? It's okay, because in the end, we all benefit. And if we all benefit, we're going to have to do a lot of hard work here to make a difference. And that, I'm very pleased and privileged and honored to have been invited here to share some of my ideas of what this place can do. Thank you.